And good afternoon, producer Susan. Is it springtime in Pennsylvania yet?
We had flurries today.
I know, and it's going to go down to 24. 3 days ago, I was wearing a golf shirt because it was 72, and tonight it's going to be 24. So it's
Yeah, it was 80 degrees over the weekend, and today
yeah,
it's like in the 30s.
and you're getting snow flurries today. All
Yeah.
right, all right. Anyway, you want to hear what we're going to try to talk about tonight?
Yeah, what's on the agenda?
All right. Well, today's for those listening, today's April 7th. Um, it's 2 days after Easter, and again, it's the focus of the show is news and perspective that you most likely won't hear on TV. Several of our stories tonight deal with the growing number of problems that have been developing in California over the past several years, but are all seeming to come to a head all at once. And our quote of the week this week is from economist Thomas Sowell on the government's track record on fixing problems by spending more money. And even his quote is going to be related to some of the things that California is dealing with. And our stupidest thing I've heard all week, we have the New York Times publishing a story about NATO that incorrectly telling readers what NATO stands for. Now you can understand, the person on the street might not know what NATO, but if you're
Mhm.
the international, you're the guy that's been doing covering international politics for more than a decade, you would know what NATO stands for, or maybe
Yeah.
you're an editor and you would double check something if the guy who
Mhm.
wrote the story told you what NATO stood for and you didn't know. Anyway, we'll get to
Yep.
that. We'll do a recap of story that 60 Minutes did this past weekend on the California Bullet Train
Mhm.
project that was supposed to link Los Angeles to San Francisco, and that project began in 2008. And we've talked about that project several times in the
Several
past, haven't
times.
we?
Yep,
Well,
several times.
did you see the 60 Minutes
I
segment?
did. I
All
did
right.
watch it. As a matter of fact, I think I called you and said, "Hey, Jersey Joe, gotta watch
Yeah.
60 Minutes tonight."
And they basically documented everything I've been saying for more than a year now about that, but we'll recap what 60 Minutes said. And as a follow-up to that story, we'll share some startling statistics about the growth in government in California over the past decade versus their growth in population. It's just startling how much government in California has grown, government and government spending versus the increase in population. The numbers will astound you. And in yet another California-based story, we'll play a clip about a series of arrests surrounding a new multi-billion-dollar Medicare fraud scheme centered around hospice care in California. We'll also give you a quick example of how President Trump's trade tariffs are helping to grow the U.S. aluminum industry. And if we have time, we'll tell you about a recent discovery of the world's largest cave system, where it was discovered and how it was formed. Did you happen to watch that segment on 60 Minutes?
I did. That was not on this week. That was on last week, and it was fascinating.
Right. And if we have time, we'll talk about that. And our taxpayer relief shot this week is from Oklahoma, where a recently widowed young mother shoots and kills one of two intruders breaking into her home before the police can arrive. She hears them trying to break in, and she calls the police. The dispatchers say the police are on the way. Well, the intruders didn't wait for the police to come, so she had to take matters into her own hand. All right. So here's our quote from economist Thomas Sowell, and I want you to remember this because it's going to apply to a lot of things we talk about. And here's from economist Thomas Sowell that we've quoted many times. He said, "The assumption that spending more of taxpayers' money can make things better has survived all kinds of evidence that it has actually made things worse." And we're going to give you some examples of that.
Yeah.
All right. So, in our stupidest thing I've heard all week, the much respected New York Times, uh, they were doing a story about, NATO and Iran and the reluctance of some of the NATO members. Anyway, they told their readers, and this is a guy, he's been an international political correspondent for more than a decade. He said that he told in his headline, North American Treaty Organization. The A doesn't stand for America. What do you think the A stands for?
Atlantic.
Right, because it's all the countries that border the Atlantic or Atlantic Ocean. And it was formed after World War II when Russia began to like take over parts of Germany and everybody became afraid of Russia. NATO was formed by all the European countries that border and America that border the Atlantic or Ocean to be basically, if you attack one of us, you attack all of us. So
Mhm.
now it's understanding if your local State College PA newspaper gets it wrong, but you're the freaking New York Times. You're the New York Times. You've been an international correspondent for 10 years. You've been covering NATO, and you should know that NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, not the North American Treaty Organization.
I mean, like you said, NATO was formed back after World War II. This was before you were born, Jersey Joe. This is something that we all learned in elementary school history class. I mean, some of us may not remember it, but yeah, we all learned it in elementary school.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's the stupidest thing I've heard all week. Again, I could forgive some local newspaper getting it wrong, but you're the
Mhm.
freaking New York Times. All right. So we've talked about the California Bullet Train project
Yeah.
many, many times on this program. So the project began in 2000. It was actually put on the ballot, and originally it sounded like a great idea. Hey, a lot of people go between San Francisco and LA. In fact, some people commute back and forth. They make the trip a couple of times a week. Why don't we make a high-speed 150-mile-an-hour train to run between those two cities, get you there in 2 hours? It's a kind of a straight shot up the coast, right? Sounds like a
Hmm.
great idea.
Yeah.
So they pitched it on the ballot to be $33 billion, and they'd have it done in about 10 years. Completion date was 2020. So it went on the ballot in 2008, and of course, if it passed the ballot, and they would start work on it. Well, so 60 Minutes did the story. So what's the status of the current project today? Well, so you meant 2008 to 2026. Is that 18 years?
What year was it again?
2008 to 2000.
Yeah, 18 years. Yeah.
So 18 years, and instead of 33 billion, they've already spent 60 billion. So how many miles of track have they laid in 16 years?
Not much at all.
Zero. 0 miles of track. There are no trains running. So no track laid. The new current estimated completion date, remember, it's supposed to be done in 2020, is now 2036, and the current estimated completion cost is $125 billion. And the current door-to-door trip time that was originally supposed to be under 2 hours is now 3.5 hours if it ever gets built. And one of the reasons it's 3.5 hours is because every politician on the state legislature says, no, 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 it has to stop in my town. It has to stop in my town. So rather than go right up the coast, they've detoured the train to the east. So it runs up through the Central California agricultural valley, and it makes stops in these little towns like Fresno and Merced and Bakersfield. Well, if
Mhm.
you're running a 150-mile-an-hour train and you're going to make it stop to pick up passengers every 25 miles, you're not going to get anywhere close to 150 miles an hour,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
And yeah, we last time we had talked about this, like you said, it was supposed to be less than 2 hours. You can fly from LA to San Francisco in 90 minutes for less than $100.
right. And that includes, by the way, that 90 minutes includes boarding and taxi time.
Yes,
Actual
correct.
airtime is 45 minutes.
Correct.
And by the way, yeah, a round trip ticket, by the way, is 148 last time I checked.
I just Googled it and you can get a flight on Frontier, which is a budget airline for $86 round trip. That's round trip.
Round trip.
So
So
that's
40,
$43 one way,
and it's 90 minutes, right?
90 minutes. It's
So,
yeah, an
so by the
hour and 30.
way, so if you had a choice, even if the prices were equal, would you spend 3.5 hours on a train? Um, and I don't believe they would give you a round trip ticket for $86. But will you spend 3.5 hour train or 90 minutes on a
No, I mean my time is worth something.
right? And by the way, and if you're going to go up there, let's say you need to make a day trip, you got to go up and see a lawyer, you
Mhm.
got to see your accountant. If it's 3.5 hours each way, guess what? That's an overnight trip, so you got to put a hotel room in.
Exactly.
If you catch a 7 o'clock flight in the morning, you're there at 8:30, you see who you need to see,
Mhm.
and you're back on the train, you're home for dinner.
Yeah.
So anyway, and by the way, does anybody believe that they're going to bring it in for the new estimate of 125 billion?
No, I mean the only way they're going to be able to recoup that money is well through either taxpayer money or to have ridiculous uh,
Right.
fares.
Right. But
And
even
again,
if they
your budget airlines will do it for less than 100.
but even if they had unlimited funds, do you think they're actually going to complete it for 125 billion dollars?
No. No,
They've
because the
been they've
longer they
been
delay, the higher the prices are going to get.
they've rebudgeted this project like 6 times in the past decade, and every time, well, our last estimate was wrong. We need to bump it, by another
Mhm.
10. Well, our last estimate, we need to bump it. So they're now projecting, uh, and by the way, so in 16 years they haven't laid a mile of track, and they're now saying, well, in the next 10 years
Mhm.
we're going to lay 240 miles of track. How
Well, it's
ridiculous is that?
400 miles from LA to San Francisco.
How long?
It's 400 miles from LA to
LA
San
to San.
Francisco.
Yeah, but they're taking the long route. They're taking the detour out through the central,
Yeah.
the Joaquin, but whatever it is, and uh, and they're going to take the long route up through Bakersfield and Fresno and
Mhm.
Merced.
Yeah.
So again, it's a boondoggle. I believe Trump has cut off all federal funding, but that's your tax dollars at work. All
Yeah, and
right,
like you said, I mean, if you just need to, if you're a commuter or you just need to, do a business deal or whatever, again, those prices I quoted are on your budget airlines where they're going to nickel and dime you for luggage. But if you're just going for the day, you're not taking luggage with you. You're bringing your briefcase or your backpack or your purse. That's it. You don't have luggage to check or carry on even.
right, and you don't need to stay overnight in a hotel. But if
And
you're
you
if
don't
you're
need to stay
trained,
overnight. So, you're not being charged your extra, 25 or 35 or $55 baggage fee. And it's
right,
a 90-minute flight. You take your briefcase and your morning coffee and
yep, exactly. Um, All right, let's move on to more California failures. Now, but we've all heard about the Learning Center fraud up in Minneapolis, right?
Mhm.
Where they had all these, they had all these learning
Yeah.
centers that were blacked out and no students. And we had the Medicaid fraud. By the way, I checked. You know what a hospice is, right?
Yeah, it's for when you're almost dying and
Yeah,
there's
you've
not
been
much left you
diagnosed
can
with a
do.
terminal illness,
Hmm.
and you have less than 6 months to live.
Hmm.
And you can go to a hospice, where they'll treat you, knowing that you're both you and they know that you're terminal and you have less than 6 months to live. And I checked, by the way, New Jersey has 7 million people. You know how many hospice centers there are in New Jersey with 7 million people?
I feel like there's probably a lot in New Jersey.
Well, I counted 18. I did a Google search. I found 18.
Okay, and there's what, six,
7 million people.
well, there's how many counties? That's almost like one per county.
Yeah, about one per county. Now,
Mhm.
Los Angeles, by the way, has 7 million people. Do you know how many hospice centers they found in the city and county of Los Angeles?
Oh, I'm gonna say probably twice as many.
How about 700?
Oh my goodness.
700. And I'm just going to play a part of this. It's a long, CBS did there's been some arrests based on this CBS investigation. 700 hospice centers in Los Angeles County alone. Here we go. Oh, by the way, and when you go in hospice, Medicare, if you're over 65, Medicare pays for your hospice treatment, end of life. Here we go.
Finding fraud, early morning raids across Southern California following a CBS investigation into hundreds of millions of dollars allegedly stolen from Medicare.
CBS LA senior investigative reporter Ross Colombo is here now with the unprecedented access the feds gave us as they made several arrests, including a married couple accused of stealing nearly $8 million, Ross.
Well, that's right, Rutabaga and Pat. More than a dozen were detained. 8 people in all were arrested, all of them accused of stealing millions of dollars in Medicare money, a problem we first exposed after finding more than 700 hospice locations across LA County that experts say all had serious signs of fraud.
All right, you heard him say 700, right?
Yes.
Some of these hospice centers were an office in a multi-tenant office building. Another one was a three-bedroom house that supposedly was providing hospice care to 20 people. So you can't see the pictures, but but on the video they're going to show you pictures of these places. So how does a three-bedroom house provide hospice care to 20 people? It doesn't. Right, here we go.
Dozens of agents descending on a San Dimas home, getting in through the gate, and getting out multiple people, all cuffed and carted away, including this couple accused of committing nearly $8 million in Medicare fraud.
I mean, part of the $8 million.
And most of that money went, as you could see, mortgage payments, cars, vacation.
And again, he's pointing to their three-bedroom ranch home, which was supposedly their hospice center.
personal expenses.
At least 8 people arrested today at several locations, all of it coming after our CBS investigation, finding more than 700 questionable hospice sites across LA County in unusual office locations, costing hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars.
Nothing is more important right now than rooting out the corruption and fraud that's happening with the tax dollars.
Federal agents claiming the state of California should have rooted it out long ago before licensing these hospices to operate.
They are not taking it seriously. They're not passing the regulations, and they're not sending people to prison.
What's the first place?
It also comes in the wake of our CBS investigation into more than 800 other fake businesses.
An elderly care facility. This is supposed to be a construction company. Now we're heading to a spa.
Also in bizarre locations, also registered with the state of California.
What are your thoughts about the state's role in that crime?
What you're talking about is exactly what we highlighted. California has totally given up its responsibility to make sure that fraud isn't happening.
So let me ask you a question. You notice this was a federal investigation and federal arrest. Don't you think it should have been California's responsibility to
It
vet?
absolutely should have been California's responsibility to take care of this matter.
Well, number one, to do the proper vetting up front, and then number two, to discover and prosecute. And by the way, so CBS did their expose, I don't know, 6 months ago, and California did nothing. It made the newspaper, it was on TV. California did nothing, so the Fed stepped in. So this gets back to Thomas Sowell's quote about how spending more money doesn't fix problems. And we're going to, so.
Well, in Medicare and Medicaid fraud, though, that is actually a federal problem.
Right, it is a federal, but yes, but it was Medicaid fraud carried out by businesses that were being licensed by the state of California. Now, let's talk about the state of California. Now, in the past, by the way, over the past decade, nationally, our population has been growing about 2% per year, which means over 10 years, we've seen about a 20% growth in population. Over the past decade, do you know how much California's population has grown by? And remember, they've had a huge influx of immigrants from South and Central America. So versus a 20% national average, how much do you think California's population has grown by in the past decade?
5%?
How about 0.4%?
Oh, how's that possible if they've had this huge influx of people?
Well, remember, we've talked a couple of times about how California's been leading the country. It's one of the top 3 states year after year in net outflow.
Oh, that is true, yeah.
Right.
As
And
is
remember,
New York.
and the people that are leaving, these are not people that are renting a U-Haul truck. This data comes from United Van Lines.
Which
Now-
tends to be for, middle to upper class.
Middle class people, the 4-bedroom home, right?
Yep.
And I can tell you, when we moved from Colorado to New Jersey, my moving bill was well over $10,000.
Yeah.
So the people who can afford United Van Lines, these are middle to upper income people. So again, net of, even despite their massive influx of illegal immigrants, California has their population has grown by just 0.4% in a decade. But you want to know how much the number of state employees grew over that same 10-year period?
Well, you threw me off when because you said they had an increase,
Yeah,
but
they
it was
did.
very low. It was less than 0.5%.
Well, that was a population increase of 0.4. So what do you think if your population grew by? Do you need a lot more firemen, a lot more policemen?
Yeah, if your population's going to grow, you need more social services.
No, but it hasn't grown. If
But
your,
it hasn't. So yeah, then how many more government employees do they have?
how about 24.5%? It grew by
Wow.
24.5%.
That's huge.
And adjusted for inflation, how much do you think their state's spending? And these aren't in absolute dollars; these are inflation adjusted dollars.
Oh, probably quadrupled.
48%. They're spending
Wow.
50% more money now than they were in 2016 on a population increase of just 0.4%. So population grows by 0.4%, you grow your state employees by 25%, and you increase your state spending on inflation adjusted dollars by 50%. That is mismanagement at its finest. If this was a company that I was responsible for, I would fire every single person responsible for running it. if this was a branch of a company that's running.
Yeah.
I mean, again, your population is stagnant. You've grown your employee base by 24.5%, and you've grown spending by almost 50% on inflation adjusted basis.
Mhm.
Staggering, staggering. Hey, how much time we got?
Oh, you got like 15 minutes.
Oh, good. All right. Um, all right. I'm going to move on to Trump's trade tariffs. By the way, oh, well, let me just recap. So going back to Thomas Sowell, bullet train fiasco, hospice fraud, California fiasco, government spending, California fiasco. And is California a better place to live now than it was a decade ago?
No.
No. So this massive increase in spending has not made things better. It's made things worse. All right. So, Trump put these trade tariffs on last spring, these other countries that were tariffing US products, and said, okay, well, if you're going to tariff our products, we're going to tariff your products. And here's an example of the result of those tariffs. We were importing a lot of aluminum, and then Trump put tariffs on imported aluminum, among other things. Well, as a result of that, an aluminum plant in South Carolina that was operating only about 60% capacity is now expanding and bringing back good paying American jobs that average, ready for this? Average 125,000 a year. The facility is returning to 100% manufacturing capacity. And as the company's called Century Aluminum, and their CEO, Jesse Gary, confirmed the positive impact, stating that tariffs are working and helping revive domestic aluminum production. And that is exactly what putting Americans first looks like. More opportunities for U.S. workers. And it's a plant in South Carolina ramping back up to 100% capacity. All right. So let's talk about the largest cave system ever discovered and was discovered recently. It was on 60 Minutes.
2 weeks ago, not last.
Do
Not
it
this
right.
last week.
And it's called the Sun Dome Cave System. Interesting story. It's not near any village. And I remember how many years ago, a local villager out looking for firewood got caught in a storm and he accidentally found it, came back and told everybody about this cave, and then he couldn't find it again. And he looked for it for 2 years before he finally found it again. And when he finally did, people, the cave explorers, it's the largest cave system ever discovered in the world. So far, they've explored 9 kilometers worth of its length, which is about 6 miles. But what's amazing about it, there are rooms in this cave system that are 65 stories high, taller than the
Yeah,
Statue of
they said
Liberty.
they could fit a skyscraper inside.
They could put a 65-story skyscraper. You could put it. Some of the rooms are so you could put a 747
Mm-hmm.
a 747 inside that building. I'm going to play just a little tiny clip from the CBS, and it's Scott Pelley. Here we go.
You just realized that you were in some place that was just so special and so undiscovered. They only allow 1,000 explorers to enter the cave each year. And we were given the last slot available for this year's tours because someone else canceled. I think we got it. The first 2 times I pitched Scott Pelley this story, he said no. And then the third time, he finally said yes. And then while we were in the cave, he said, "Why did I say no to this again?" And I said, "I don't know." It's really hard to get into, and I'm really grateful that we were able to get in because it's really one of the greatest things we've ever done.
I've had such good fortune in.
Anyway, I urge you, if you go on YouTube, you can just Google Vietnam cave system and you can find the whole, I think it's a 17-minute segment. I urge you to watch the 17-minute. It's the most breathtaking thing you ever want to see. And the reason they haven't found the end of it, there's still a river that runs through, the river that carved it. It's limestone, the water's slightly acidic, and over millions of years, the acidic water in the stream basically eroded and dissolved the limestone, creating this massive cave system, again, with 65-story high ceilings and whatnot. But they still haven't found the point where the river exits the cave, so it has not been fully explored yet. So I urge you, Google Vietnam cave system and watch the 17-minute, 60-minute segment. Trust me, you won't be sorry. All right, let's see what else I got here. All right, taxpayer lease shot. Producer Susan, why do we call them taxpayer lease shots?
Well, let's let one of the sheriffs of Florida tell us.
All right, here's the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida.
Somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully, you'll save the taxpayers money.
And that's the reason, because by time keeping somebody in jail these days is about 80 to 100,000 a year. So 10 years in jail is $1 million. And then add in the cost of the trial, the court-appointed attorney, then you're well over $1 million. So anyway, so this is kind of tragic. This is an 18-year-old mother. Her husband died of cancer while she was pregnant with their child. So the video shows her holding this, maybe the child's 6 months old, in her arms. And she hears somebody trying to break into the house. She calls the police, and here's what happens.
Extraordinary case of a mother's protective instinct. 18-year-old Sarah McKinley was home alone on New Year's Eve with her baby. Her husband had died the week before of cancer when two men tried to break in. She then made two fateful decisions. She picked up a shotgun and she picked up the telephone and called 911 and asked for permission to fire. Here's ABC's Ryan Owens.
It starts like a classic horror movie. A young mother alone with her baby. Nothing around but the lonely plains of Oklahoma when the family dog growls at the door.
He was trying to tell me something. So I looked out the door and saw that it was that man.
That man was a 24-year-old who Sarah McKinley believed was stalking her. Police say he was armed with a 12-inch hunting knife, and he wasn't alone. Detectives say he was with this friend. The duo was trying to break down the door.
I got the 12 gauge and proceeded to walk back to the bedroom with my son. He was crying at the time, so I put a bottle in his mouth, trying to get him to stop. I got a pistol and called 911 on my cell phone.
Since she lives in the middle of nowhere, that would take a while. For 20 terrifying minutes, she waited as the intruders tried everything to knock down her door.
The noise of the busting of the doors was worse than any part. That was the scariest. Wondering which time he hit it was going to be the time that he got in.
Well, I've got two guns in my hand. Is it okay to come from the store? Well, you have to do whatever you can do to protect yourself. I can't tell you that you can do that, but you do what you have to do to protect your baby.
I was going to have to choose him or my son, and it wasn't going to be my son, so I did what I had to do.
The second he broke down the door, she shot and killed him. His alleged accomplice ran away, but later turned himself in. Police call the shooting justified.
You're allowed to shoot an unauthorized person that is in your home.
Oklahoma is one of 30 states with something called the castle doctrine. Basically, your house is your castle, and you have the right to kill to protect yourself. Other states require a homeowner to try to retreat or escape before using deadly force. Southern Methodist University law professor.
All right, so are you in a castle doctrine state or a duty to retreat state?
I am in a castle doctrine state.
Which means you don't have to go run and lock yourself in the bathroom if somebody's trying to break. All right.
And man, 20 minutes for the police to arrive. That is exactly why we always say when minutes count, when seconds count, the police are minutes away. Well, that's 20 minutes.
Yeah,
you know what can happen in 20 minutes?
Yeah, it can be all over and done within 5.
And when you're in those kind of situations, I mean, 1 minute feels like an eternity.
Exactly. And so by the way, and after 20 minutes, the police still hadn't arrived. Mm-hmm. It took them 20 minutes to break in. I don't know how many more minutes after the shooting the police got there, but they tried to break in for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, they succeeded. Boom, 2 blasts from a double-barrel shotgun, and that was all she wrote. So I think that's a classic taxpayer relief shot. All right, Producer Susan, anything you want to add before we sign off?
No, as we were talking about these taxpayer relief shots and the 2 different sheriffs in Florida, did you look up that other sheriff in Florida, Sheriff Mike Titwood? He's another controversial sheriff down in Florida.
No, I didn't. I got to write myself in it. What was his name?
He's the one. I think his name is Michael Chitwood. he's the one who, if you're not going to parent your children, I'm going to parent your child.
Okay. No, I'm going to make myself a note to look that up. Maybe we'll talk about that next week.
Yeah, but Florida's got some good sheriffs down there. They don't mess around in Florida.
That's right. All right. Anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Nope.
All right. Well, folks, thanks for listening. And I appreciate you giving up 30 minutes out of your busy day to listen to me ramble on about the things I find of interest important and importance. I urge you to watch the 60 Minutes thing on the Vietnam cave system. If you want to see some materials and story links you heard me talk about today, give producer Susan a couple of days and you'll be able to find them on the Jerzee Joe website at jerzeejoe.com. Just remember to spell Jersey with an R, a Z, and two E's. That's JERZEE, jerzeejoe.com, no space. If you'd like me to email you directly any of those story links, just send me an email to joe at jerzeejoe.com. Or if you'd like me to put you on a distribution list for the podcast, you don't have to go hunt for it. Just email me at joe at jerzeejoe.com. Just remember to spell Jersey with an R, a Z, and double E's. And with that, producer Susan, I'm all done if you are.
All right, Jerzee Joe.
Talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.